Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Dablola Ogunshaki. Here on Today in the News, we read and give in-depth analysis on some of the stories making waves across Nigeria. This morning, I'm starting with Vanguard. Vanguard is leading with 10th National Assembly leadership crisis. North Central governors kick against zoning to meet Tinubu and NWC. As aggrieved aspirant vowed to take battle to plenary. Tinubu's men move to stop probe of Akpabio, Tunji Ojo over NDDC funds. Rep spoil for war today over alleged doctors' house rules to favor Abbas. APC placates North Central with SGF. Party supremacy should be upheld. That's coming from Kalu. You can see that story on page 5. There's a photo story here showing the Afrobeat musician Seun Kuti after he turned himself in at Lagos Police Command Headquarters Ikeja yesterday. On page 9, United States slams visa ban on unnamed Nigerians undermining democracy. Energy. On page 14, Dangote refinery to meet 100% Nigeria's requirements. That's coming from report. On health, World Health Organization decries global rise in anemia as 571 million women, 269 million children suffer. On sport, Tottenham way up move for Eberechi Eze. On page 9, petrol subsidy cost could be more than 13 trillion naira, federal government admits. Allow your successors to work as governors, Saraki Aliu, others tell outgoing governors. You can see that story on page 9. Stories above on page 19. Naira devaluation, others pressure inflation rate to 22.22%. Focus on debt management, others Okonjo-Iweala urges incoming governors. Federal government kicks against bill to stop migration of doctors as medical doctors start strike tomorrow. 120 billion naira USSD dispute. Banks, telcos disagree on technical issues. Buhari should stop study, leave others. That's coming from Matawale. You can see those stories on pages 28 and 8 of Vanguard newspaper. Away from there, let's move to the Punch newspaper. The Punch is leading with Tinubu's inauguration. Military Inspector General warned troublemakers as court hears anti-handover case. You can see that on page 2. Nollywood stars mourn as Murphy Afolabi is buried. You can see that on page 2. Hilda's marathon cookies matches world record grabs global attention. That can be seen on page 3. Stories above, United States announces visa ban on Nigerian pool riggers and others. Lastly on Punch, pay rise, resident doctors begin warning strike Wednesday. That can be seen on page 14. Now let's move to the Guardian. Guardian is leading with uncertainty over $2.3 billion CMS deal as greed collapses 99th time under Buhari. That can be seen on page 6. Governors kick against move to halt doctors' migration. Buhari leaves inflation at highest in 17 years. Buhari Lawan Hilda, a world record feat. You can see that on page 2. Lastly, on The Guardian, Assault Kuti apologizes, gives officer 12,000 naira for vehicle repairs. That can be seen on page 12. Lastly, let's move to The Nation. Nation is leading with Inspector General warned subversive element against plot to derail May 29. Political actors conspiring to stop inauguration of President-elect Tinubu and governors. There's a quote here that says, political actors with subversive agenda and their collaborators, particularly their foot soldiers, who they are exposing to political radicalization and extremism, should henceforth jettison their ongoing premeditated attempt to create tension within the national space with intention of derailing the May 29, 2023 presidential inauguration. End of quote. You can see that on page 4. And here we have Turkey poll runoff May 28. Stories above, 13 trillion spent on subsidy in 16 years, says federal government. And lastly, on The Nation newspaper, we have NBS puts April inflation rate at 22.22%. That can be seen on page 25 of The Nation newspaper. And that's all we have on the front pages of the dailies. Join us after the break for the analysis. Welcome back. If you're just joining me, this is Today in the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Dablola Okunshaki. Joining me to analyze the front pages of the dailies this morning in the studio is Mr. Dayo Akintobi, He's the publisher of Illipeji Today, Lekki Today, and Ikeja GRA Today. Good morning, Mr. Dayo.
Good morning, Damilola. Good morning to all our viewers.
Yes, thank you very much. Before we move to the stories of today, I want you to talk about Hilda's achievement. What do you think about it?
Well, it's interesting. It's very poignant because it's bringing Nigeria into the limelight again globally. You know, just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about Tiwa Savage at the King's coronation. Now Hilda Bassi has brought Nigeria. Nigeria needs things like this to burnish our international image. Globally, we actually are high achievers and we do a lot of things that are critical to human evolution, you know, but we've had our international reputation sullied by some nefarious Nigerians over the years. So when you see stories like this coming out of Nigeria, it's really heartwarming. Also, it's an inspiration to other young Nigerians to try and achieve things that seem impossible or difficult to do. So kudos to Hilda. It's a wonderful thing for Nigeria. It's a wonderful thing for the youth, and more grace to her elbows.
Yes, and now let's move straight to the front pages this morning. And Vanguard is leading with the story of a National Assembly. I think the crisis trailing the All Progressive Congress is actually deepened again as the North Central Governors Forum and National Assembly members kicked against the exclusion of the zone from the sharing of principal office of the legislature. And now they finally agreed to go to the president-elect to resolve the issues. What do you think about the crisis rocking that?
Well, there's an imbalance when you look at the geopolitical zones and you consider the fact that the Deputy Senate President and the Speaker of the House of Representatives are both coming from the Northwest. That's two principal positions coming from the Northwest. Of course, the Northeast has a Vice President, so the North Central is left out completely. So you look at it and you say, why should one region have two and one region have none? When it's so easy to share them equally between the three in the North, right? In the South, we already have the president-elect coming from the Southwest. The person they want to be Senate president is coming from the South-South. The person that is going to be the Deputy Speaker of the House is from the Southeast. So it looks like it's been divided. The beauty of this is that there are actually 6 positions and there are 6 geopolitical zones. So there's no reason why each one can't get one. And that's the way it was looking until all of a sudden, one zone gets 2, one zone gets none. So that gives grounds for protest, of course, because you look at it and you say, this is not fair. In all of it, North Central is the only one that didn't get anything out of the top 6 positions in the country. Then there's also the issue of imposition. Many of the aggrieved, not just North Central, but many of the senators-elect and House of Representatives-elect, they are not happy by the fact that the ruling party microzone to the point of actually picking those who would fill those offices. They didn't just say, okay, somebody from Northeast, somebody from Northwest, somebody from South-South, somebody from Southeast will fill these positions. They actually chose the individuals. So the National Assembly members-elect are saying this is imposition. This is undemocratic, and we should be allowed to choose our own leaders. So there are 2 issues that are bedeviling this whole process, and that's the imbalance by virtue of the fact that North Central is shut out completely. And there's also, of course, the issue of the opposition to imposition by the president-elect. Actually, it's coming from the National Working Committee of the APC. But we've been made to understand that that working committee consulted with the president-elect and got his buy-in into the selections. So it's the NWC and the president-elect who have imposed these candidates, and there's general opposition from a wide majority of the members-elect. And that is leading to the dangerous precedent of what happened in the Dogara years, whereby there could be a dark horse coming into relevance because of this disagreement if it is not resolved. The main reason for that is because the ruling party, the APC, has 170 odd members elected into the House of Reps. But the other 5-6 parties together have 180 something. So together, if they can maintain a unified bloc, they have more votes than the ruling parties. So they can actually select, or they can elect among themselves who will be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives if the APC doesn't get its act together. There are some within the APC who are even considering either defecting or voting with the opposition because they don't agree with the way the party has zoned this thing at the moment.
All right, let's talk about APC's senatorial presidency candidate Akpabio.
Yes.
And Senator Akpabio, we are aware that there's alleged multi-billion naira fraud case against him.
Yes.
And of course, this year we still had some court cases where he was unable to attend due to health reasons. But some people are against his candidacy, saying someone with such a case shouldn't actually vie for a seat of the Senate presidency.
Yes, well, there's issues of integrity, there's issues of propriety, but the standard according to the courts is that a person is innocent until proven guilty. However, the way to do it with integrity is that if you're under a cloud of suspicion until such a time as you have cleared your name or your name has been cleared by the court, on your own volition, you really should step aside from holding any positions of responsibility. But there's no law that compels you to do that. It's a personal choice. So it comes down to the values of each person who is voting. As long as the senator has put himself up for that position and has said, look, I'm innocent until proven guilty. Yes, there's pending charges against me. There are some people who believe he was dodging the EFCC by claiming health. He was dodging trial and dodging the hearing. And there are some who think the reason he's actually gunning for Senate presidency is that once he becomes Senate president, it will be difficult to carry on a prosecution against him, although he doesn't have immunity constitutionally like the president and the vice president and the governors. I don't think Senate president has immunity. But nonetheless, once he occupies such an important position, it will be challenging to take him to a court of law to prosecute him. So that will more or less give him immunity for the period he's Senate president. But there's no law, as I said, that stops him from contesting. But morally, it's a moral question. And so I throw it back to the hands of those who will vote for Senate president. What are your values? What is your morality? Do you think that a person who has been accused of something, even if they've not been tried and they've not been acquitted or convicted, but for now they are under indictment? Indictment means you've been formally accused and charged to court. So is somebody under indictment morally fit to lead our National Assembly? It is his fellow senators who are going to vote, who should vote their conscience and vote their morality. And they should remember that all Nigeria is watching, and we will notice the way they vote in this matter and know that it speaks to their morality and their values and their sense of right from wrong. So we can't stop Senator Akpabio from contesting. So I believe since he's not been convicted by any court, it's up to the individual person to make that assessment of whether he's fit for office or not.
All right, talking about voting and voters, United States have slammed a visa ban on Nigerians undermining democracy. They slammed a visa registration on them. What do you think about United States? Although they didn't name them, so that alone is still causing some reactions on social media.
Yes, that's a big problem, because I don't see, if you're going to make that kind of a claim, why would you not name them? If you know you're not going to name them, then you don't need to tell anybody this issue. The only thing is that there's a list at the airport, and when they present themselves, you send them back and say, sorry, you had electoral malpractice, so we can't let you into our country. I think that they overplayed their hand by making this big deal and big publicity about this list without naming the people. I think without naming it, it has undermined their purpose entirely. However, then the issues come again about sovereignty. To what extent should foreign countries be able to interfere in our own national politics? The blame is ours. It's only because we are all so desperate to go to America. We all want to go and visit America. Why? Why can't we visit? Why do we have to go to America? What's the allure about America that makes America? The only reason America can flex like that is because they know there's an attraction for Nigerians to go. If Nigerians ignored America and didn't care about going to holidays there, and we went to Obudu Cattle Ranch and Whispering Palms and all our own local attractions.
Yes.
And you'll be surprised. I followed somebody on Facebook who did a tour of Nigeria. In terms of the tourist attractions, you'll be surprised. Areas in Nasarawa, areas in Kogi, areas in Ondo State, where we have beautiful tourist attractions. And they are underutilized because Nigerians are not aware or Nigerians are not interested. We prefer all things foreign. So the US is more or less blackmailing us because they know that Nigerians want to make a rush to their country, whether for tourism, whether to go and study, whether to go and work, whatever. So they can hold the hammer over our head and say, we know you want to come here. And so if you don't conform to our own standards, if you don't conform to our own democratic standards and our own democratic ideals, we'll hold this hammer over your head. So it's our fault. We gave them that authority over us by virtue of our attraction for going to their country. If we ignore their country completely, they have no say. So I don't agree with them interfering. Although I've read some comments that have said, well, how do you bring election riggers and those who conduct malpractices in election, how do you bring them to book? Well, it's an internal problem that requires an internal solution. Let us begin to punish those we catch who are, why should it be America who is holding the hammer over our own people? Why can't we catch these people, prosecute them, and punish them publicly? Lock them up, seize their assets, take away the positions that they helped to rig publicly. We should be able to sanction and correct our own errors. It shouldn't take a foreign power or a foreign country to come and be holding the hammer, say, you've been a bad boy, behave yourself, behave yourself. That's essentially what America is doing. You've been a naughty boy. So I think we've still sold ourselves short to colonial countries, to those countries who exerted colonial authority, the UK, the US, because of this, our penchant and our hunger and desire for all things Western. We want their approval in everything that happens. We want their culture, we want their dress, we want their religion, we want their language, we want everything. And so they recognize that and they're holding it over us. So it's our fault.
We also want their medical expertise.
It's our fault.
All right, let's move on. The federal government on Monday, they kicked against the bill before the National Assembly seeking to control the migration of doctors for greener pastures abroad.
Yes, this brain drain is a problem. But what federal government is saying is the way you are going about it is wrong. You can't legislate on people's lives. You can't. People who have voluntarily gone through a course of study, they paid their dues. I mean, what the person and the bill was introduced by Lagos State Legislature, and what he's saying is that what we pay to go to medical school in this country is a pittance. And it doesn't compare to what they pay in other countries. And so, because he's trying to allude to the fact that medical education is subsidized, and as a result, there should be a payback from the beneficiaries of the subsidy. But what the federal government is saying is that if you give a scholarship, for example, if the price is low, you priced it low, and people are paying what you ask them to pay. They are not arguing about it. They are not looking for discount. If you say it's 50,000, they are paying the 50,000. So if you say it's $1 million, they'll find it and they'll pay as well. So you've not subsidized, even if the price is low, you've not subsidized anybody. But there are some who are on scholarship that the government is fully paying that 50,000 for them. Those ones sign something called a bond. That bond means that when they graduate, they will work for the federal government for so many years to cover the cost of the scholarship. That's fine, that bonding issue. The federal government is saying, no problem. Those who get federal government or state scholarships or whatever will sign a bond. But for those who paid their way, which is the majority, scholarship is less than 5%. The majority who paid their way, you can't come and now force them that they can't get their license even after they finish practicing because simply you want to stop them from leaving the country. So the House of Representatives member, he's got a good idea, which is to stop brain drain. But this solution is the very wrong solution. As the Minister of Labour said yesterday, it's like using a sledgehammer to kill an ant, right? So it's the wrong way. The right way to do it is to beef up the educational standards of the country. Then you can charge commensurately. Nobody's forcing you to charge low. You are charging low because you know you are delivering substandard services. So beef up your medical facility, the training facilities, the teaching facilities, and then charge more for it. And each person is free. The Constitution guarantees us liberty, freedom of movement, freedom of association, freedom of speech. All those freedoms were fought for with human lives. So nobody can just come and circumscribe your freedom and say, oh, because you went to a Nigerian school, which maybe you paid less than what you would have paid if you were schooled abroad, so therefore you are not free to leave the country and go and seek greener pastures elsewhere. The solution is make the greener pasture here. so that there's no attraction. It goes back to that same thing we were
That's
talking about earlier about the visa ban. Make our country more attractive so that we don't care about going to the US or the UK or anywhere else to go to school, or to go and be an election rigger wanting to go and visit for tourism. Make our country more attractive.
All right, let's end this with Fela Kuti's son, Seun, who turned himself into the Lagos State Police headquarters over police assault. What do you think about the case itself?
Well, from the bit I've seen, and I'm an advocate of let's not judge until we've heard both sides, but from the bit I've seen, and that bit showed Seun striking the policeman, I think that part was wrong. No matter what the provocation, no human being has the right to lift his hand and strike another human being. That is assault. Let alone a police officer in his uniform, who is a symbol of authority of the rule of law in this country. It is bad enough to strike a fellow Nigerian civilian. It is 10 times worse to even strike a police officer. So in that, no matter what the provocation was, he had no right to take the law into his own hands. So I think he should have to face the law, and I think the law should be allowed to run its course. And whatever the adjudication is, whether guilty or innocent, I think he should be made to pay the price. Now, on his arrest yesterday, he turned himself in. We saw pictures of him handcuffed. They say he was paraded, and there's been a lot of uproar about that. First of all, he's not a hardened criminal. Why should he have been in handcuffs? They say there's a Lagos state law that prohibits parading of accused persons who've not been tried and found guilty, that even if you parade them, you're supposed to obscure their face. But that the show yesterday was intended to humiliate him, that the police want to make an example of him to show that you don't do that, not to police who put their lives on the line for us every day, and not to even your fellow citizen. So it's a bad situation all the way around. The one thing that struck me watching the video was that Seun seemed to have a lot of anger in him. And I don't think it was just that incident. I think that incident was just the fuse that lit the bomb. I think from the way I saw it, I think he's got a lot of built-up anger because, he's an activist for social injustice. He was very prominent in the NSAS movement. He's always spoken out against injustice and unfairness and corruption and all the ills of our society. But the difference between him and his father was that his father used his music as a tool for protest and for advocacy. His father didn't go out and physically fight anybody to make his point. So if Seun is angry at the things that are going on around us, he needs to find a legal way and a more acceptable way to express himself than to go out and strike people. So it's unfortunate, but he's going to have to go through the process, and if he's found to have guilty of having committed this offense, there will be a penalty and he will have to pay it.
But someone who turned himself in to the police command,
Yes.
do you think he was supposed to be handcuffed?
Well, I read the statement of the police PPR, and he said that's procedure. He said that is procedure, that even if you turn yourself, first of all, remember, he struck a police officer. So they have to protect themselves against him, because for now he's considered to be a dangerous person, because how do they know that he comes in there, he's not striking somebody else? But apart from that, the police said that's their procedure, that whether you turn yourself in or you're arrested by police, when you are being taken in for arraignment, you are normally handcuffed. And I see that too in documentaries about America and so on, irrespective of your station. I think Donald Trump, when he was arraigned recently, was the only person I've seen who's been under arrest going into a court in a criminal matter who was not handcuffed. And I think that's because he was a former president of America. But even very highly placed people in America, Bill Cosby, Jeffrey Epstein, big names in America, when they've had to, even those who turned themselves in, when you are going for that thing that they take your picture, they thumbprint you, they do all that process, you are generally handcuffed. It's procedure, both for the safety of the people who are apprehending you, the people who are receiving you, for their safety, and also because there's a judicial process underway. It is a serious, sober thing. You have been accused of committing a crime, and if it is a crime of violence, we're not talking about a crime of paper or fraud or corruption, a crime of violence, then they err on the side of caution, that this person has shown a propensity to be violent before. We can't take the risk of allowing him loose in this place. We don't know what he can do. You could be a loose cannon. I mean, you saw the video of him on Third Mainland, you'd really be worried that does this person have control of himself? So there's nothing wrong with him having been handcuffed. What was wrong was them documenting it and releasing it on social media. That part I didn't like.
All right, let's end this on a lighter note with Mr. and Mrs. And the first person speaking today is Mr. says, I know she's your friend, and that's all I know about her. And Mrs. replied, well, she's Elsie. Let's your name remind you she's someone else's wife.
Mrs. is always suspicious of Mr. that he has all these nefarious intentions, especially where women are concerned. Mrs. seems to be very insecure and think that everything in skirt that passes, Mr.'s eye is on it.
But Mr. always proves that right.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Dayo, for joining us today.
My pleasure always.
Yes, and it's the publisher of Illiquity today, like it today, Ikeja GRA today. It just reviewed and analyzed some of the stories with us on the front pages. Now, to get more of our top stories, you can follow us on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. On Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, our WhatsApp number is also displayed on your screen. My name is Damlola Ogunshaki. Have a lovely Tuesday.